Okay, so I'm recording this audio before the Derek Chauvin verdict, and in case you're living under a rock, in the year 2020, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a man named George Floyd was killed by Derek Chauvin in what might be called a knee chokehold. George Floyd told police he was struggling to breathe before the former officer put a knee on his neck. And that's according to NBC News. And actually, you can find the footage where that is actually revealed to be true. Yes, George Floyd initially actively resisted being handcuffed, but he became considerably more compliant, and it appeared he may have been having a panic attack or some other physical or mental health related issue prior to the infamous moment where the knee was put on his neck. So, in fact, the autopsy further revealed that George Floyd was infected with COVID-19, which could obviously exacerbate whatever breathing issues he had, in addition to having a goddamn knee on his neck for nearly 9 minutes, right? So far, am I being overly ideological on this? You can tell me in the comments, right? I do not think I'm being ideological at all here. Now, I know how so many videos on police brutality go. I might be accused of attempting to look woke or otherwise very deep or maybe, anti-police or something like that. But let me just try to give out some straight facts here, though obviously some opinions and interpretations will inevitably come into play. So the knee on the neck was less than 10 minutes, but for most of us, it felt like nearly 2 hours, right? It seemed to just take such a long time for that cop to finally get his knee off the neck. The police had every opportunity to reverse course and actually prevent not only the death, but practically any type of injury that could conceivably be in their control. Yet they didn't do that. Surely most in the jury have already seen the videos, as they were everywhere. I saw people recording the arrest as it unfolded on the day of Floyd's death. We all saw, the footage that people released. And I heard him say repeatedly and perfectly well, "I can't breathe." Obviously followed by his death, which the police most obviously did nothing on scene to prevent. In fact, it appears that they prevented medical attention from being brought to George Floyd. No officer advised Chauvin to remove the knee from the neck either. No one rushed the man to a hospital or tried to resuscitate him before paramedics arrived, I should say. They did nothing of the sort that I can recall, and it all looked eerily more like a public execution of a suspect than an accidental death. In addition to the witness video, one can also find certain footage from at least one nearby surveillance camera. That additional footage only demonstrates further that George Floyd was having a physical and or mental health related issue, and therefore should have been handled with extra care, and certainly not have anyone kneel on his neck. Again, not being ideological here, am I? Doesn't the fact that somebody appears to be under some sort of distress indicate a need for extra caution? To me, that's kind of a very straightforward bit of logic to be applying to such a scene. Unfortunately, I have to get political here, alright? So, plenty of self-professed patriots, quote unquote, were quick to act as cheerleaders for unaccountable police departments in the aftermath of this footage. This, of course, means that if you had been in the position of George Floyd outside that store, or in a similar position, and had been killed, some people would have celebrated that fact that you were publicly executed, and that would forever be some strange part of your legacy, your life story. Other people really oddly celebrating what looked like a public execution. Then, of course, you have the bizarre words of Trump. Remember that guy, the former president, the guy who lost? But anyway, remember when he said the concept of chokehold? His words, not mine, sounded great. Here's what he actually said, the exact quote. The concept of chokehold sounds so innocent, so perfect. So who actually talks like that? Right? That's such a bizarre way. I mean, putting aside how messed up that actually sounds, it just sounds like a clunky use of language. I'm mostly riffing on this video here, but my use of language is somewhat better than that, at least, right? Who calls a chokehold innocent and perfect? What does that mean? Who actually talks like that? Anyway, put that aside. As we know from so many cases, the concept of chokehold is not always so innocent, so perfect, as it can lead to unnecessary death, and that's particularly if someone already has a medical condition involving breathing, like Eric Garner, who died when the NYPD put him in a chokehold way back in 2014. His alleged crime was selling Lucy cigarettes. For that, I guess he had to die. Like George Floyd, he also said, "I can't breathe," and he died. Of course, that should be emphasized. And that's exactly what someone would say if they had trouble breathing, right? And also the fact that they would die also indicates that, yes, they may have had trouble breathing. Apparently, these simple points can't get through to certain people somehow. This is a ridiculous... It shows just how stupid this country can be. All right? Also, like George Floyd, Eric Garner was on the ground surrounded by police in what also looked like a public execution. So does this not appear to you like a pattern? Isn't there a reason to think police methods where they choke people to death are questionable? After all, what would happen if an ordinary person were to hold an officer by the throat because the officer was accused of some unlawful activity? Would that person not be regarded as violent by society at large? Wouldn't the police department themselves think something needed to be done? Of course. Why should it be different when the tables are turned, as in these famous cases, where the cops are, using chokehold methods to take people out and obviously occasionally kill them? In fact, Derek Chauvin had other incidents where he apparently was quick to resort to force. In one case, sometime before the George Floyd accident, well, I guess it wasn't an accident, incident is what I meant to say. Anyway, some kids had police pointing guns at them for playing with their Nerf dart guns. Again, that's, the kids were playing with the Nerf darts, and the cops were pointing guns at them. One of the officers was none other than Derek Chauvin, the Minnesota cop. And he apparently said, "Most of you will be 18 by the end of the year." And he added, "That means you'll be old enough for big boy jail." That's a very intimidating thing to say, isn't it? It's like, yeah, I'm going to track you down and find some minor offense, or you're destined for jail, basically. To me, that indicates someone who saw policing as a mere game, with the object of inevitably targeting certain people for incarceration, or, of course, maybe worse. On the George Floyd video, witnesses can be heard shouting at the officer to let Floyd go, meaning at the very least to get off his neck and to get some help. Darnella Frazier, one witness who shot footage of the death, said, quote, "It wasn't right. He was suffering. He was in pain." Again, is that really an ideological point? Is that like a political argument right there? I think it gets more to the rudimentary concept of decency. And I think we all saw it, right? We all saw this footage. We all know what it meant. And he's not breathing because it was either a willful public execution or something that eerily looked like one on cell phone video and on the surveillance camera footage. No matter what the verdict says, we'll all know what we saw. Some will deny it, but in the end, I think even they who deny it still know what this was.